Hi, this is Rev Ed with today's Back Porch Devotional from Psalm 46, verses 1 through 7. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice. The earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. You know, I've never actually been through any kind of real earthquake. In this part of the world, we have some of those dinky earthquakes that rattle the china in the cabinets for a little bit, and that's about it. But I can imagine that a genuine earthquake is something truly terrifying. The earth splitting open and houses falling down, and as the psalmist describes, mountains being thrown into the sea and the waters of the ocean roaring and foaming. I'm sure that is one of the most terrifying experiences that you can go through. And that's, in one sense, what's being described here. But of course, in another sense, we all go through different sorts of earthquakes in our lives, don't we? When things are just so terribly disrupted that it feels as though the earth has come open underneath our feet, as though mountains that we thought would last forever have fallen into the sea. This happens when someone we love dies, or when a relationship falls apart, or perhaps when our hopes and aspirations seem to crash on the rocks. There are many, many ways in which we can feel like we are going through an earthquake. And what we need to remember always is that God is our refuge and strength. One of the most common things that we do, and one of the worst things that we do, is to seek comfort in our pain through anything but God. People use drugs or alcohol or pornography, or sometimes even things like work or exercise. Those are not bad things, but if you focus on them to the exclusion of everything else, if you make them an idol, then yeah, they're not good for you. We have to recognize that all of our strength and all of our hope and all of our foundation in the midst of an unstable world is in God alone. God is in the midst of his people, and he will not let us be moved. It feels like we're moving. It feels like the ground is shaking beneath us, and yet we have a firm place to stand. We stand on the love of God. We stand on the mercy of God. We stand on the grace of God, which has been poured out on us in Jesus Christ. So in these things, it does not matter ultimately what's going on around us, because we know that the Lord is with us. As Paul wrote in the 8th chapter of Romans, if God is for us, who can be against us? What can possibly come against us? There is nothing that will enter our lives that doesn't go through God's hands first. And as hard as that can be sometimes to wrap our hearts and minds around, it ought to comfort us greatly, because everything is indeed under his control. The psalmist reminds us, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Lord of hosts is simply the commander of the divine army. There are hosts and hosts and hosts of angels who do God's bidding and who have been sent to protect his people. But we also know that he is the God of Jacob. And I'm comforted by that, because if you remember, Jacob, although he was one of the patriarchs, he was a scoundrel. He was a cheater. He robbed his brother of his birthright. He tried to outwit everybody he ever came in contact with. He was not known much for telling the truth, but he had multiple encounters with God that set him on the right path. And God wrestled with him one night, all night long, as you recall. The angel of the Lord did. And before dawn, put his hip out of joint. Jacob, who was then renamed Israel, limped for the rest of his life as a reminder that he had wrestled with God and God got the upper hand. So this God who actually has the power to put our hips out of joint is the one who is with us always. And you'll remember that Jacob was renamed Israel. And Israel in Hebrew means he wrestles with God. We're going to wrestle with the things of this world. We're going to wrestle with heartbreak in our life. We're going to go through things that feel like an earthquake has completely upended everything that we know or thought we could count on. And yet God is with us. We need to remember always the words of Jesus in John 16:33. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. When we have put our trust in Christ, we know that it is the God of Jacob who is with us. That even though we might be scoundrels and liars and people who have done all sorts of wicked things, God has loved us in Christ and has claimed us for himself. And there is no sin that we can commit that is greater than the love of God for us that was poured out on the cross. So trust in him this day. Receive his comfort and peace this day. And know that the earthquakes will come and go, but the Lord our God is with us forever. God's blessings be upon you this day.